in the first course redesign part, the main place that I put a lot of my energy and time was into learning how to create videos for class lectures. And so the part that I really, in the sustaining and kind of scaling up process, I really wanted to try to make sure that that learning process got spread and those materials and resources got spread. So our department, as many departments around the CSU have probably experienced, has had a really huge influx of lecturers, of part-time faculty teaching our required classes. So we have now 5 sections of our statistics class and 5 sections of the research methods class that comes in the sequence after the statistics class. So the problem we've come up against is having many, many different faculty teaching different sections of the class. And so finding a way to make sure that we were communicating just a lot of basic things like learning outcomes and those sorts of communicating amongst faculty, and then sharing resources like the videos that I had created for my class. So I created a SAC-CT Blackboard site, an LMS site, that all of the faculty who are teaching our statistics classes and research methods classes are a member of. And it's a place for everybody to share syllabi, I share the videos and resources, and we have almost every semester, we have someone new coming to teach one of those 2 classes, more often now the research methods class. So being able to have a place that we can direct them to help them get oriented and see some examples of syllabi and have some resources ready to go. That's kind of the main, I guess, institutionalization piece, was to have that. And of course, our LMS is changing from Blackboard to Canvas, but we'll just transition it over. Everybody's busy, so I don't know. I need to track a little bit more how much the site is being used, and maybe come up with ways to, we have meetings and advertise to the faculty what's going on with that. But yeah, following up and making sure that faculty are accessing the resources and things is kind of the next step. And then me making sure that I'm sort of curating the site so people can definitely send in, it's not just me putting things up, but other people send in resources. And then I'm just sort of organizing into folders so that it's fairly easy to maneuver around the site. This part, I think just the difficulty will be making sure that it's flexible for faculty and useful and that people use it. So, and then hopefully we can, if this is helpful to folks, then we might, in other classes, we have other required classes where we have multiple sections and multiple people teaching. So it might be something that they want to use a similar format for those classes. I guess what we're learning as a department and what I would pass along is maybe pay attention to, we focus a lot, and rightly so, on student learning outcomes and how are we measuring student learning outcomes and things like that. I think what our department is currently learning and that I would pass on to others is to pay attention to faculty learning and faculty communication. So I think that's an important step, is to make sure that all the faculty everybody again is so busy, that making sure that we have institutionalized channels that people know to go to communicate with each other. I think that's the main thing I would pass along.
I was trying to take the class that is regularly offered to 40 people in a section, and I was trying to see how turning it into an online section might help to increase the enrollment in the class per semester and over the course of each 12-month cycle. So the class had already been offered in an online version once or twice to a small number of students, and this was trying to increase the enrollment to up to 120 or more, 150, 160 students. Well, the short answer is just like our campus offers the opportunity to teach a mega section of face-to-face students, if it's up to 120 students, for example. The online environment also gives people the opportunity to enroll up to 120 or more students, depending on where you set the enrollment caps. Now, the way that I tried to do this, while still keeping the feeling of a small class, is to make sure that every student is part of a small group of maybe 9 or 10 students. And I keep those small groups stable over the course of the semester, and I keep the learning activities within those small groups really related to the small group so that the student doesn't ever have the feeling that, oh no, I'm just a person in a sea of people kind of just watching lectures and then going home. So the interesting thing about this scaling up practice is that it has allowed me to teach the same kind of class to a summer group of maybe 25 students, as well as a spring group of 170 students because of the small group structure. Now, each department may do this in a little bit of a different way. The philosophy department has occasionally given an instructional student assistant to a professor to assist them with some of the grading and some of the applying of rubrics to different parts of the material. And so this has continued in our department, both for some of our mega sections that are face-to-face and for some of our mega sections that are online. We've tried to be strategic in allocating instructional student assistants to the instructors who are doing these attempts to scale things up. I should probably also say that in our department, there have been several people who have been working on scaling up some of these online versions of their course. And so we were able to speak with each other during each phase of the process about what things worked well, what things didn't work that well. And we had different goals as each individual instructor, but one of my goals was to help increase the ability of students to pass through this particular course within their general education pathways. But one of the things that I want to emphasize is that the rate of students getting D's, F's, and W's for withdrawing from a class is something that I wanted to keep an eye on to see whether or not it was increasing drastically or going down substantially. I also wanted to keep an eye on whether the students who were getting A's, B's, and C's was fluctuating significantly. One of the things that I had expected to happen was that we would see a little bit of a sort of a natural sorting going on with students who were saying, I want to take this online version of the course. I was thinking we would see some students who really thrived in that environment and naturally getting a lot more A's and B's in the class because people realized this is a very successful pathway for me. But I also was wondering whether we would still have a large number of students who are not really realizing that the online course is still just as demanding as the face-to-face class. And so I was wondering whether we would still have a similar number of D's, F's, and W's. What I saw somewhat surprised me in that the range of students getting low B's and C's actually decreased, and the students getting A's and high B's increased, and the students getting D's, F's, and W's also increased. Now, you may wonder, why is that? And I'm continuing to try to figure out why that is, both in reaching out to individual students and in looking at the numbers of, are there trends about these students? I think one of the things that's occasionally to explain what is going on here is the uptick in students getting A's and B's has increased a lot more than the uptick in students getting D's, F's, and W's, even though there's still a percentage-wise uptick in each case. And that's partly because I think that as the word is getting out that these online courses are ways of still getting good classes met, students are realizing, look, I can do very well in this online class. But occasionally what's happening is that students are thinking that an online class is a way of easily going from, say, 12 to 15 units or 15 to 18 units, and then they're sort of putting it on their back burner. And when they do that, they inadvertently create a situation for themselves that makes it a little bit more likely that they'll get a D or an F or a withdrawal the first time. Some of my favorite stories actually come from students who did just that the first time they took this online class. They realized that, a few weeks in, actually not soon enough, but they realized, I'm behind in this class. I was thinking of it as an easy class. I was thinking of it as a class that I could just sort of save to the end of the week and get stuff done while I'm already working a job and taking my face-to-face classes. And they end up not doing well the first time they take it. And then they say, I'm going to do this same class again next semester. I'm going to do better. And they end up shining. They end up doing very well the second time they take it, partly because I think they approach it with the mindset of, okay, I need to be serious about this. I need to go in just as committed as I am at the beginning of the semester as I am to all my other classes. And so that, I think, has it's been a nice thing to see with a few students. Of course, I'd rather them all not have to take it twice to learn their lesson the hard way. I'd rather them all jump in and earn that A- or A just the very first time they take it. Let me tell you one of the difficulties that I faced, which dealt with enrolling students in these groups. You may realize, as an instructor who deals with the normal flow of students dropping a class and adding a class, that there's a little bit of a process at the beginning of the semester where the class enrollment is in flux. It's important in teaching an online class to keep on top of that as much as you can so that any new students who are added to your class, either because you've allowed them to add as an instructor giving permission, or because they've just added through the computer system, through the registrar's office, it's important to make sure that they get plugged in to the groups that you've already got set up. I had a few cases where, a student would get added to the class, but then not immediately join a group, not be thrown into a group by me, and that caused a little bit of confusion with them. But once I realized that this is just a part of the course maintenance that needs to happen, then you can either do that yourself, or if you have an instructional student assistant who's helping you, you can make sure that that's one of the tasks that they are on top of on a daily basis at the very start of the semester. One of the nice things about these technologies is that they do sometimes allow for early intervention with students who might not know what's going on or just might have a little bit more trouble navigating some of the online bells and whistles. And to the extent that you can identify those students by what they are or are not doing on the online list of activities that they're supposed to be doing and reach out to them quickly through a targeted email, that actually is one of the many ways that technology can be the instructor's friend in helping the students who might need that early nudge in the beginning of the semester to get just those nudges they need to help them get on the right path for the rest of the semester. One of the things that I have realized is that using the tools of your learning management system, whatever it happens to be, whether you're using the campus-approved one or whether you're trying to do something through like a Google site or something else, is to try to leverage the technology to save you a little bit of time. So for example, when you're using a multiple choice question bank, try to reuse questions from one semester to the next as you add to your question bank and as you set up your quizzes to draw questions from different parts of your subject matter. That way you're not always having to reinvent the wheel, and you can often have the automatic grading of these multiple choice questions. That also increases the frequency with which you can make some of these assessments. So you don't necessarily have to put it all on a midterm and a final that you have to hand grade. You can sometimes do like a weekly assessment that gives quick feedback to you, quick feedback to the student. One of the things that I've also realized is it helps to set things up as much as you can in as transparent a way as you can for the students. So for example, in my case, I tell them, I expect you on Wednesday night by midnight to have made your original weekly post for a given week. And that's going to be time-stamped by the system, so everyone will know whether or not it's on time or late. And then if you're going to be making your replies to your classmates, you need to make those by Saturday night, and you need to have a certain frequency of those. And the nice thing about an online environment is that you can easily collate by a given student exactly what posts they made over a weekly period, for example, and you can see what they said to different students, you can see how much they wrote. It's a very efficient way of being able to give students feedback and also further guidance for the way that they participate in the discussion aspects of a class. I would like to encourage other people to think boldly, but also to work incrementally in the way that they scale up. So for example, the first time you do a class, to scale it up from say 40 to maybe 80, do it just in sort of that bite-sized amount, and then see what works best for that kind of scale up before you try to scale it up again to 160 or something greater than that. Of course, there are any number of opportunities for online content delivery, whether you're talking about these MOOCs, these multiple online users where they have thousands of people, or whether you're just taking a small group of upper level students in a 15-person class and making things available to them, and also making them available to each other, making the students available to each other. I also think that it's important to be clear in your own mind and clear with your students what kinds of interactions they should expect with the instructor in these kinds of environments. Are you going to be dropping in on their discussion boards and contributing typed comments? Are you going to be having sort of synchronous live chats with people where they don't see your face but they can see your fingers typing? Are you going to be having video chats, like sort of multiple faces, kind of like in the Brady Bunch, right, where you got the one person talking in the middle and then the other people around the perimeter? Those kinds of things are going to be as unique to individual classes and individual content types and personality types. And I think that the clearer you are in your own mind of which kinds of things you want to experiment with as you scale up, the better you'll experience the different learning curves that are involved in that kind of scaling up.
Psych 101 in our department is offered in about 6 or 7 different sections per semester. And it's taught by tenure-track faculty and non-tenure-track faculty, and sometimes faculty that are new to the department. And so there was quite a lot of variability, or is quite a lot of variability, in how the class is taught. There are, of course, specific criteria that every class needs to hit, but how those criteria are taught is different. It varies. And so a few colleagues of mine in the Department of Psychology all redesigned our statistics courses, flipping the class, but doing it in different ways. And we applied for IRB approval to collect data and analyze that data so that we could not only investigate the cumulative impact of flipping the class, but also the different elements that we piloted to see if there were any that were more successful than others. And the idea is to then communicate those findings with our department, such that we could potentially make some recommendations for all sections be taught having some common elements. The institutionalization part of it will be after we have had a chance to analyze our data. The semester just ended, so we haven't gone through everything. But after we've had a chance to analyze the data, there is a specific kind of methods and statistics committee in our department that we will communicate different findings. If flipping in general is better than non-flipping, or if there are certain aspects of flipping that worked better than others. And then it'll be institutionalized by creating a department-wide foldered resource, database that new faculty members coming in or existing faculty members in the department that are teaching it can draw from. We'll have example test questions, we'll have example strategies, pedagogical techniques that worked, and things like that. The difficulty was having us all do flipped, but doing different elements of the flipped classroom. I think the way it manifested ended up working out quite well. My two other colleagues both used videos that they posted online, and I didn't. But one colleague did those videos but differently than the other. So we are still trying to decide the extent to which any variability we saw could be explained by those kinds of small adjustments in the curriculum. But having us, the primary difficulty was that having us all flip the class, but doing different elements of the class, we may not find, differences that can be explained by those small differences. Communication with your department is absolutely key. We were very lucky that there were 3 of us that are experienced teaching statistics that decided to do this this process. But if you find, even the most positive, wonderful results, but don't have a department that's supportive of those efforts or is willing to communicate those findings to other faculty members, then you're really not going to get very far. So having the committee that evaluates those methods and statistics courses was really crucial in our department, and then also having a department that's very supportive of communicating those findings, and a dean that's supportive and all that. Keep trying, keep communicating, keep innovating and seeing if there are better ways to do things that are common problems in courses that are taught regularly and often.